You need to leave now." The voice was smooth, confident, and completely unfamiliar in Octavio Moretti's penthouse bedroom. He jerked awake, his hand instinctively reaching for the Glock hidden beneath his pillow. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, and there she stood, a stunning black woman wearing nothing but his white dress shirt, her long legs bare, dark hair cascading over one shoulder. She held a steaming cup of coffee in manicured hands and watched him with eyes that sparkled with dangerous intelligence. "Who the hell are you?" Octavio's voice was rough with sleep and confusion. His mind raced, trying to piece together last night. The charity gala, the whiskey, the beautiful woman who'd approached him at the bar with a smile that could melt steel. "Samantha Richards," she said, taking a sip of coffee like she owned the place. "CEO of Richards Global Enterprises. And before you reach for that gun, remember, I'm the one who got you home safely after you drank half of Carmine's best bourbon." Memory crashed back. The gala, her laugh, the way she'd challenged everything he said with razor-sharp wit, the undeniable attraction that had pulled them together like magnets. "What do you want?" he asked, sitting up slowly. At 42, Octavio Moretti was used to waking up in control. This woman had shattered that in less than 12 hours. Before we continue with what happens next, I want you all to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from around the world. Your support helps me bring you more stories like this one, about power, passion, and the unexpected connections that change everything. Now back to our story. Samantha walked to the window, her movements fluid and confident. "I know who you are, Octavio, the great untouchable Don of the Moretti family, the man who built an empire on fear and loyalty." She turned to face him, her dark eyes holding his gaze steadily. "I also know you're drowning." "Careful," he warned, his voice dropping to the dangerous tone that had made grown men beg for mercy. "You're walking on thin ice." She laughed, a rich, warm sound that somehow managed to be both mocking and musical. "Honey, I don't walk on thin ice. I melt it." Setting down her coffee cup, she moved closer to the bed. "Your organization is bleeding money. The Torino family is moving into your territory. Your lieutenants are questioning your leadership. And worst of all, you've become predictable." Octavio's jaw tightened. Every word she spoke was true, but hearing it from this stranger's lips felt like salt in an open wound. "You don't know anything about my business." "I know everything about business," Samantha replied coolly, "and yours is failing." She sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something exotic and expensive. "Your late wife, Maria, ran the social connections. She was your bridge to legitimate society. Your cover. Without her, you're just another aging criminal with a target on his back." The mention of Maria sent ice through his veins. "Don't. It's been 3 years, Octavio. 3 years of you hiding behind whiskey and old strategies that worked when dinosaurs roamed the earth." Her voice softened slightly, but her words remained sharp. "You want to honor her memory? Stop dying with her." He stared at this impossible woman who'd somehow seen through every defense he'd built. "What makes you think I need saving?" Samantha smiled, the kind of smile that had probably launched 1,000 business deals and destroyed just as many competitors. "Because I don't save people, darling. I collect them, and you—" She reached out and traced a finger along his jaw, sending electricity through his skin. "You're the most interesting acquisition I've encountered in years." "I'm not for sale," he growled, even as his body responded to her touch. "Everyone's for sale, Octavio. The only question is the currency." She stood, smoothing down his shirt where it barely covered her thighs. "Some people want money. Others want power. You—" Her eyes gleamed with understanding that was almost predatory. "You want to matter again?" Before he could respond, she was walking toward the door, her movements hypnotic and purposeful. "Get dressed. We have a meeting in 2 hours." "We don't have anything," he called after her. She paused at the doorway, looking back over her shoulder with a smile that promised either salvation or destruction, possibly both. "Oh, but we do. You see, while you were sleeping off that bourbon, I bought 40% of your shipping company's debt. We're partners now, whether you like it or not." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Octavio alone with the devastating realization that his carefully controlled world had just been hijacked by a woman who wore his clothes better than he did. 2 hours later, Octavio sat across from Samantha Richards in the boardroom of Richards Global Enterprises, a gleaming 40-story tower that pierced the Manhattan skyline like a chrome and glass sword. Gone was his morning confusion, replaced by the cold calculation that had kept him alive in a world where weakness meant death. Samantha had transformed as completely as he had. The playful seductress from his bedroom had been replaced by a business predator in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes. "Her impressive building," Octavio said, his tone giving nothing away. "But I didn't come here to admire your architecture." "No," Samantha agreed, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany table. "You came because I own you now. At least 40% of you." Octavio opened the folder, his expression never changing as he scanned the documents. Purchase agreements, debt transfers, contract modifications, all bearing his company's signatures and seals, all completely legal and devastatingly binding. "How?" he asked simply. "Your CFO has a gambling problem," Samantha replied, settling back in her leather chair with the satisfaction of a cat who'd found the cream. "Amazing how much a man will sell when his kneecaps are in danger. I bought his debts, offered him protection, and suddenly he became very cooperative." Octavio's jaw tightened. He'd suspected Vincent's weakness, but hadn't acted fast enough. Another mistake in a growing list that was threatening everything he'd built. "What do you want?" he asked, closing the folder with deliberate calm. "I want to watch you win," she said, surprising him. "Your enemies are circling because they think you're weak. The Torino family, the Colombian cartel moving into Brooklyn, even some of your own men are taking bets on how long before you're dead or dethroned. And you want to prevent that?" Samantha laughed, a sound like champagne bubbles and broken glass. "Honey, I want to profit from it. A weak Moretti family means chaos in the shipping lanes. Chaos means higher insurance rates, security costs, reduced efficiency. Bad for business." She stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette sharp against the city below. "But a strong, modernized Moretti organization." She turned back to him, her smile predatory. "That's worth investing in." "Modernized?" Octavio's voice carried a warning edge. "Your operation runs like it's 1985, she said bluntly. "Cash payments, handshake deals, loyalty based on fear and tradition. Meanwhile, your competitors use cryptocurrency, encrypted communications, global supply chains, and data analytics." She returned to her seat, leaning forward with the intensity of a general planning a war. "I can give you all of that. Cutting-edge technology, legitimate business fronts, international connections, financial instruments that would make the IRS weep with joy. In exchange for? Partnership. Real partnership." Her eyes held his steadily. "I provide the resources and modern infrastructure. You provide the muscle, the street knowledge, and the ruthless decision-making that built your empire in the first place." Octavio studied her carefully. Beautiful, brilliant, and dangerous, a combination that had already cost him one night's peace and 40% of his shipping company. "Why me? You could partner with any criminal organization." "Because the others are thugs with delusions of grandeur," Samantha said dismissively. "You built something that lasted. You understand that real power isn't about fear. It's about making yourself indispensable." She opened another folder, revealing photographs and documents that made Octavio's blood run cold. Pictures of his safe houses, financial records that should have been impossible to obtain, detailed organizational charts of his entire operation. "You've been watching me." "For 6 months," she confirmed without a trace of apology. "Ever since the Torino family started their expansion, I needed to know if you were worth saving or if I should start shopping for a new partner." "And your conclusion?" Samantha's smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. "You're not just worth saving, Octavio. You're worth believing in. Under all that grief and stubbornness, you're still the man who turned a neighborhood protection racket into a multinational empire." She slid another document across the table. "This is my offer. Read it carefully. You have 24 hours to decide." Octavio picked up the contract, scanning the terms that would either resurrect his organization or sign its death warrant. "And if I refuse, then I cash in your debts, liquidate your assets, and watch the Torinos pick over what's left of your territory." Her voice was matter-of-fact, without malice or regret. "Business is business." "Darling?" As he stood to leave, Samantha's voice stopped him at the door. "Octavio, that woman you think you see when you look at me, the seductress who spent the night, she's real too. The question is whether you're brave enough to handle both versions." He turned back, studying her face for any sign of deception. All he saw was challenge, intelligence, and something that might have been hope. "24 hours, he said finally. 24 hours, she agreed. But they both knew he'd already decided. The only question now was whether he'd admit it to himself. Octavio's penthouse felt different when he returned, smaller somehow, as if Samantha Richards had infected it with her presence. He poured 3 fingers of bourbon and stood at his window staring out at the city where his grandfather had first carved out a piece of the American dream with nothing but brass knuckles and unbreakable will. The contract lay unopened on his dining table like a loaded gun. 24 hours to decide whether to trust a woman who'd outmaneuvered him before he'd even known they were playing the same game. His phone buzzed. A text from his lieutenant, Marco. "Emergency meeting. 1 hour. Torino's made a move." Octavio's jaw tightened. Perfect timing. Either coincidence or Samantha Richards was playing a deeper game than he'd realized. An hour later, he sat at the head of a scarred oak table in the back room of Rossini's restaurant, surrounded by 6 men who'd sworn their lives to the Moretti family. Their faces were grim and the air thick with cigarette smoke and barely controlled rage. "They hit the warehouse in Queens," Marco reported, his weathered face dark with anger. "Torched the whole thing. 10 million in merchandise, gone." "Casualties?" Octavio asked, his voice deadly calm. 3 of our guys in the hospital. Sal Torino's message was clear. Pay tribute or this is just the beginning. Murmurs of outrage rippled around the table. Vincent, his traitorous CFO, shifted nervously in his seat. Octavio's eyes found him, holding his gaze until sweat beaded on the man's forehead. "We hit them back," growled Tony Marcuso, Octavio's most hot-headed captain. "Show them what happens when they mess with the Morettis." "With what?" asked Frank Rossi. "The family's consigliere. Half our soldiers are on parole, our weapons cache is depleted, and our cash reserves are—" He glanced meaningfully at Vincent. "Compromised." "We rebuild," Octavio said simply, "like we always have." "With respect, Don Moretti," Frank continued carefully, "rebuilding takes time we don't have. The Torinos smell blood in the water. They'll keep pushing until—" "Until what?" Octavio's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Until you all decide I'm finished? Until you start shopping for a new boss?" The silence that followed was deafening. These men had followed him through wars, betrayals and federal investigations, but loyalty, he was learning, had an expiration date. "Nobody's saying that," Marco said finally, "but Frank's right. We need capital, weapons, new territory. The old ways aren't working anymore." Octavio thought of Samantha's words. "Your operation runs like it's 1985. Maybe she was right. Maybe they all were. His phone buzzed with another text, this time from an unknown number. "Watching the news. Warehouse fires are so expensive these days. My offer stands. S. "I need 48 hours, Octavio announced, standing abruptly. "Nobody moves on the Torinos until I give the word." "Boss," Tony started to protest. 48 hours, Octavio repeated, his tone brooking no argument. "Anyone who can't wait that long can find a new family." He left them muttering and speculating, but he didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, he had a plan that didn't involve drinking himself into oblivion or relying on strategies that had worked when cell phones were the size of bricks. Back in his penthouse, Octavio stared at Samantha's contract for 2 hours, reading every clause, every contingency, every hidden meaning buried in legal language. It was brilliant, ruthless, and offered him something he thought he'd lost forever, a future. At midnight, he called the number on her business card. She answered on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." "The warehouse fire," he said without preamble. "You're doing—" "Partly," she admitted without shame. "I may have shared some intelligence about your security weaknesses. Consider it a demonstration of what happens without proper partners. You're playing with fire." "Ms. Richards." "No, darling." Her voice was liquid silk with an edge of steel. "I'm playing with you. Much more dangerous." A pause. "Have you decided?" Octavio closed his eyes, thinking of Maria, of the promises he'd made at her graveside, of the legacy he was supposed to protect. Then he thought of the fear in his men's eyes, the vultures circling his empire, the slow decay of everything he'd built. "I want to meet tomorrow. Not in your office? Somewhere neutral. Central Park. The Bethesda Fountain. Noon. How do I know I can trust you?" Samantha's laugh was soft, almost fond. "You don't. But you can trust that I need you to succeed almost as much as you need me to survive. That's the most honest foundation any partnership ever had." She hung up, leaving Octavio alone with his bourbon, and the growing certainty that he was about to either save his empire or destroy it completely. With Samantha Richards, there would be no middle ground. Outside his window, the city glittered with promise and peril, just like the woman who'd walked into his life wearing his shirt and carrying the keys to his future. The Bethesda fountain sparkled in the autumn sunlight as Octavio approached, his trained eyes automatically cataloguing potential threats and escape routes. Old habits died hard in his line of work, especially when meeting a woman who'd already proven she could outthink him. Samantha sat on a bench facing the fountain, looking deceptively casual in designer jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater. Dark sunglasses hid her eyes, but he could feel her attention on him as he approached. "You're early," she said without looking at him. "You're not surprised?" Octavio settled beside her, maintaining careful distance. "Punctuality is one of your few predictable traits." She turned toward him, pushing her sunglasses up to rest atop her head. "Along with your tendency to wear black suits, even in casual settings." He glanced down at his charcoal Armani suit and couldn't help the slight smile that tugged at his lips. "Some habits are harder to break than others." "That's what I'm counting on." Samantha opened the leather portfolio beside her and withdrew a tablet. "I've had my people work through the night. Here's what I'm proposing." The screen displayed financial projections, organizational charts, and strategic plans that took Octavio's breath away. She'd essentially redesigned his entire operation from the ground up. "Phase 1, she explained, her finger tracing across charts and graphs. "We modernize your money laundering through a network of legitimate businesses, tech startups, real estate development, renewable energy investments, all very trendy, very profitable, very clean. The initial capital for these investments, my contribution. Consider it venture capital with very specific performance expectations." Her smile was sharp as broken glass. "Phase 2 involves upgrading your security systems, communication networks, and operational procedures. No more burner phones and handwritten ledgers." Octavio studied the projections carefully. The numbers were staggering, not just the potential profits, but the level of legitimacy she was offering. "This would make us almost completely legal." "Almost," Samantha agreed. "We keep just enough of the traditional operations to maintain your reputation and territorial control. Fear is still useful. It just needs to be more precisely applied." She swiped to the next screen, revealing detailed intelligence reports on every competing criminal organization in the tri-state area. "Phase 3 is expansion. While your competitors are still fighting over street corners, we'll control shipping lanes from Hong Kong to Hamburg." Ambitious. Necessary. "The criminal landscape is changing, Octavio. Organizations that don't evolve get absorbed or eliminated." Her dark eyes found his. "Look at what happened to the Colombians in Miami, the Russians in Brighton Beach. They got comfortable with old methods and lost everything to more adaptive competitors." A jogger ran past, and both of them automatically assessed her as a potential threat before dismissing her. Some instincts were too ingrained to fade. "What about my men?" Octavio asked. "They've been loyal for decades. They won't adapt easily to corporate boardrooms and quarterly projections. The smart ones will learn. The rest Samantha shrugged with casual ruthlessness. "Every organization has redundancies. We'll offer generous retirement packages to those who can't make the transition." "You mean elimination?" "I mean evolution. Your choice how that happens." Her voice carried no judgment, just cold pragmatism. "But Octavio, if you want to honor your late wife's memory, consider this. She believed in building something lasting, something bigger than just survival. This is how you do that." The mention of Maria sent the familiar spike of pain through his chest, but for the first time it was accompanied by something else. Hope. "Partnership terms," he asked. 60-40 split of profits, with me holding controlling interest in legitimate ventures, you maintaining control of traditional operations, joint decision-making on all strategic matters." Samantha leaned closer, her perfume subtle but intoxicating. "And full access to each other's resources and intelligence networks." "Full access?" Her smile was enigmatic. "I don't do anything halfway, Octavio. If we're partners in everything." The implication sent heat coursing through his veins. This wasn't just a business proposition, it was an invitation to something far more dangerous and potentially rewarding. "I need guarantees," he said, struggling to maintain professional distance. "Protection for my people during the transition, Assurance that you won't use your position to undermine my authority. Done. But I have one condition of my own. Samantha's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. No more hiding behind grief and whiskey, and I need a partner who's fully present, not a ghost haunted by what he's lost. Their eyes locked, and Octavio felt something shift inside his chest, a wall that had been in place for 3 years beginning to crack. 70-30, he said finally, and I retain veto power on any decision that affects family loyalty. 65-35, and we both have veto power. Samantha extended her hand. Deal? Octavio stared at her outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. No more simple solutions, no more predictable enemies, no more hiding from the future in bottles and memories. He clasped her hand in his, surprised by the strength of her grip and the electric current that seemed to pass between them. Deal, he said. Excellent. Samantha's smile was radiant and terrifying. Now, let's go handle the Torino problem. Nothing says new partnership like making our enemies disappear. As they walked away from the fountain together, Octavio realized that for the first time in 3 years, he was genuinely looking forward to tomorrow. Naraya. The Torino family compound in Queens looked like a fortress designed by someone who'd watched too many gangster movies. High walls, security cameras, guards with obvious weapon bulges under their suits. Everything screamed dangerous criminals live here to anyone with functioning eyes. Octavio and Samantha sat in the back of her armored Mercedes, parked 3 blocks away, studying live surveillance footage on her tablet. Her technical team had hacked the Torino security system in less than 20 minutes. 12 guards visible, probably 6 more inside, Samantha murmured, her fingers dancing across the screen to mark positions. Standard rotation every 2 hours. Sal Torino is in the main house. Heat signature analysis confirms 3 people in the master suite. You came prepared, Octavio observed, impressed despite himself. I don't gamble with incomplete information. She looked up from the tablet, her dark eyes glittering with anticipation. How would you normally handle this situation? Drive up to the front gate with 20 soldiers, kick down the door and beat Sal unconscious until he agreed to back off? Octavio's tone was matter-of-fact. Quick, direct, leaves no doubt about consequences. Effective but messy, also generates police attention, media coverage and federal interest. Samantha's smile was like watching a chess master contemplate checkmate. I prefer surgical precision. She pressed a button on her phone, and the tablet screen switched to show bank account information, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios. Sal Torino's entire fortune is tied up in cryptocurrency exchanges I happen to control, real estate developments that depend on city permits I can influence, and shipping contracts that route through companies I own. You're going to bankrupt him? I'm going to erase him. By tomorrow morning, Sal Torino will discover that he's lost 90% of his net worth to a series of unfortunate market fluctuations and regulatory complications. Her smile turned predatory. Amazing how quickly criminal empires collapse when their cash flow disappears. Octavio stared at her with growing admiration and alarm. That's brilliant, ruthless, completely legal? Samantha powered down the tablet. The beauty of financial warfare is that your enemies destroy themselves. Sal will spend the next 6 months desperately trying to liquidate assets and maintain loyalty among soldiers who aren't getting paid. His response will be violent. Desperate men do stupid things. Which brings us to Phase 2. Samantha's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Right on schedule, she answered with practiced warmth. Detective Morrison, thank you for calling me back. Yes, I have that information we discussed about the warehouse arsons. Multiple witnesses, financial records, even security footage, everything you need for federal charges. Octavio watched in fascination as she spent 10 minutes providing what sounded like detailed evidence of Sal Torino's recent criminal activities. Her voice never lost its professional courtesy, but her eyes gleamed with savage satisfaction. Federal task force raid happens at 6 a.m. tomorrow, she explained after hanging up. By the time Sal realizes his money is gone, half his organization will be in federal custody. You set this up before we even partnered, Octavio said. Not sure whether to be impressed or concerned. I told you I'd been watching for 6 months. Did you think I was just taking notes? Samantha leaned back in her seat, looking pleased with herself. The Torino problem was always going to require elimination. I just chose to solve it in a way that benefited our partnership that didn't exist until yesterday. Details. She waved dismissively. I was 90% certain you'd agree to my terms. The other 10% would have required more traditional persuasion methods, such as... Her smile was enigmatic and slightly terrifying. Let's just say I have very good relationships with several federal prosecutors who are always looking for major organized crime cases to build their careers on. The implication hit him like ice water. You'd have sold me out. Only if you'd been too stubborn to see reason. Samantha's voice held no apology. I told you, Octavio, I collect useful people. One way or another, you were going to be useful to me. He should have been angry, should have felt betrayed or manipulated. Instead, he found himself laughing, a genuine sound he hadn't made in years. What's so funny? She asked. You're the most dangerous woman I've ever met, Octavio said, still chuckling, and I've met some truly terrifying people. Flattered, but you haven't seen anything yet. Samantha's phone buzzed with another call. This time, her expression grew serious. Morrison again. Something's wrong, she answered, listened for 30 seconds, then hung up with a curse that would have made his soldiers blush. What? Octavio demanded. Sal Torino is dead. Someone beat us to it. Her eyes were dark with concern. Single gunshot. Professional execution. Happened an hour ago. The implications raced through Octavio's mind. Who else knew about your plans? That's what we're going to find out. Samantha was already texting rapidly, her fingers flying across the screen. But Octavio, this changes everything. Someone is playing a deeper game than either of us realized. As if to emphasize her point, Octavio's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice was coldly familiar. Hello, nephew, said Angela Torino, Sal's sister, and the most vicious enforcer in the family. We need to talk. Seems we have a mutual problem now. Octavio met Samantha's eyes, seeing his own thoughts reflected there. Their carefully planned solution had just become infinitely more complicated. The abandoned warehouse in Red Hook felt like stepping into a tomb. Octavio moved through the shadows with Samantha beside him, both of them hyper-aware that this could be either a negotiation or an execution, depending on Angela Torino's mood. She waited for them in the center of the empty space, a slight woman in an expensive black coat who radiated danger like a nuclear reactor. Angela Torino had been running the family's enforcement operations since she was 16, and 20 years later she'd refined violence into an art form. Octavio Moretti, Angela said as they approached, her voice carrying just a hint of her grandmother's Sicilian accent. Still handsome, still stupid enough to walk into obvious traps. Angela. Octavio stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to react if she pulled a weapon. My condolences on your loss. Spare me. Angela's dark eyes shifted to Samantha, evaluating her like a predator sizing up potential prey. And you must be the corporate princess who thinks she can play in our world. Samantha Richards, right? CEO of Richards Global, net worth somewhere north of $2 billion, no criminal record, but plenty of criminal friends. You've done your homework, Samantha replied coolly. I'm impressed. Most people in your position are too busy bleeding out to conduct proper research. Angela's laugh was like breaking glass. I like her, Octavio. Too bad I'm going to have to kill her. That would be unwise, Samantha said before Octavio could respond. Your brother's death wasn't random violence. Someone orchestrated it specifically to destabilize both our organizations. Explain. Samantha pulled out her tablet, showing financial records and communication intercepts. Sal's cryptocurrency portfolios were targeted for liquidation 6 hours before his murder. Someone wanted him financially ruined before they killed him. Maximum chaos for his organization. Angela studied the data with the focused intensity of a professional killer. The timing suggests coordination, inside information. Exactly, which means someone with access to both your family's operations and our business arrangements. Samantha's voice carried grim certainty. We're being played against each other. By who? That's what we need to find out. Octavio stepped closer, noting how Angela's hand remained steady, despite the obvious stress. Your brother was an idiot, but his death benefits neither of our organizations. Someone else wanted this war. Angela was quiet for long moments, processing implications and calculating odds. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its mocking edge. My sources say federal raids are planned for tomorrow morning. Multiple targets, mostly my brother's operations, but some of yours too, Octavio. Her eyes narrowed. Convenient timing, don't you think? Samantha's jaw tightened. Someone fed information to law enforcement to accelerate the timeline. The same someone who killed Sal, Angela concluded. Question is whether you two are part of the setup or just useful idiots. We were preparing our own move against your brother, Octavio admitted. Financial pressure and legal complications, not murder. His death actually complicated our plans. Because now I'm in charge instead of him, Angela said with grim humor. Sal was ambitious but predictable. I'm neither. The three of them stood in silence, each calculating advantages and risks. Finally, Angela spoke again. Proposal. Temporary truce while we identify and eliminate our common enemy. After that, we go back to trying to destroy each other like civilized people. Terms? Octavio asked. Information sharing. Coordinated response to federal pressure. Joint investigation into Sal's murder. Angela's smile was sharp as a blade. And if we discover one of you orchestrated this, the survivor gets to kill the guilty party slowly. Acceptable, Samantha said immediately. But I want insurance, access to your intelligence networks, and protection guarantees for key personnel. Done, but I keep control of my family's traditional operations. No corporate restructuring, no modernization programs, no sensitivity training for psychopathic enforcers. Octavio found himself caught between admiration and terror. These two women were negotiating a partnership built on mutual suspicion and temporary necessity. Exactly the kind of relationship that either forged unbreakable alliances or spectacular betrayals. Agreed, he said finally. But we move fast. If federal raids are coming, we have less than 12 hours to prepare. Angela's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it, and her face went pale beneath her olive complexion. What? Samantha demanded. 3 more bodies just turned up. All family lieutenants, all killed in the last 2 hours. Angela's voice was deadly quiet. Professional hits, same signature as Sal's murder. They're accelerating, Octavio realized, taking out leadership before the federal raids to maximize organizational chaos. Which means, Samantha added grimly, we're probably next on the list. As if summoned by her words, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the warehouse. Multiple engines, coordinated movement, professional positioning. Back exit? Angela asked. Blocked, Samantha reported, checking her phone's security app. 6 vehicles, minimum 12 shooters, military-grade coordination. Octavio drew his Glock, noting that both women had produced weapons with similar speed. Looks like our truce starts now. Angela's smile was pure predatory joy. Been too long since I had a good fight. Try to keep up, corporate princess. The warehouse lights suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness just as the first bullets shattered the windows. Gunfire erupted through the warehouse like deadly thunder, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness in strobing bursts. Octavio rolled behind a concrete pillar, pulling Samantha with him, as bullets sparked off steel beams overhead. How many shooters? He shouted over the chaos. At least 8 from the east entrance, Angela called back from behind a stack of shipping crates. Professional spacing, coordinated fields of fire. These aren't street thugs. Samantha was on her phone, fingers flying across the screen, even as concrete chips rained down around them. Calling in support, she explained tersely. Security team, 5 minutes out. We don't have 5 minutes, Octavio snapped, returning fire at shadows moving between broken windows. His shots were precise, calculated, each bullet meant to suppress and control rather than simply spray and pray. Angela moved like liquid death through the darkness, her small frame an advantage in close quarters. She'd already flanked 2 shooters, taking them down with clinical efficiency, before melting back into the shadows. These aren't random killers, she reported during a brief lull. Military training, expensive equipment, too coordinated for mob work. Private contractors, Samantha agreed, reloading her compact pistol with practiced ease. The question is, who's paying them? The answer came from an unexpected source, a voice speaking through a portable speaker one of the attackers had placed. Ms. Richards, Mr. Moretti, Ms. Torino. The electronically distorted voice was calm, almost pleasant. You're making this much more difficult than necessary. We simply need to have a conversation. Friendly conversation usually doesn't involve automatic weapons, Angela called back, her voice dripping sarcasm. Exceptional circumstances require exceptional methods. You've all stumbled into something much larger than your petty territorial disputes. Octavio exchanged glances with Samantha through the strobing darkness. The voice was educated, American, with the kind of authority that came from giving orders to people who killed for a living. "What do you want?" Samantha shouted. "Cooperation. The three of you represent significant assets that could be very useful to certain government interests. Consider this a job interview with particularly high stakes." "Government?" Octavio's mind raced through possibilities. CIA, NSA, some black budget operation that officially didn't exist. "Details can wait until you stop shooting at my people," the voice continued. "Ms. Richards, your international business connections are of particular interest. Mr. Moretti, your organizational skills and territorial control have been noted. Ms. Torino, your enforcement capabilities speak for themselves." "Sounds like a fantastic career opportunity," Angela said dryly. "What happens if we decline? Unfortunately, you know too much about current operations to be allowed to walk away. But cooperation brings significant benefits: legal immunity, expanded territories, access to intelligence networks that would make your current resources seem primitive." Samantha's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at it and swore creatively. "What now?" Octavio demanded. "Federal raids just got moved up. They're hitting our properties in 30 minutes. Her dark eyes were furious. "This whole thing is a setup. They're forcing us into cooperation by eliminating all other options." The pieces clicked together in Octavio's mind with sickening clarity. They orchestrated everything. Sal's murder, the federal pressure, even this conversation. We're being recruited whether we want to be or not. "Smart man," the voice acknowledged. "The old criminal landscape is obsolete. Global terrorism, international cartels, cyber warfare. These threats require resources and methods that traditional law enforcement can't handle. We need people who understand how to operate outside legal boundaries." "And if we refuse?" Angela asked. "The federal raids proceed as planned, followed by unfortunately tragic deaths during arrest attempts. Very sad, but sometimes criminals resist arrest with fatal consequences." Silence stretched through the warehouse, broken only by the distant sound of approaching sirens. Samantha's security team was close, but not close enough to change the current balance. "How do we know you'll honor any agreement?" Octavio called out. "Because, Mr. Moretti, you're much more valuable alive and cooperative than dead and martyred. Your organizations provide perfect covers for international operations that require absolute deniability." "Counteroffer," Samantha said suddenly, her voice carrying the sharp confidence of a woman closing a billion-dollar deal. "We'll consider cooperation, but we negotiate terms as equals, not as conscripts. Ms. Richards, we control significant resources you clearly need, or you wouldn't be going to these elaborate lengths to recruit us. That gives us leverage." Her smile was visible, even in the dim light. "And I never negotiate from a position of weakness." The warehouse fell silent except for the growing sound of approaching vehicles, Samantha's security team, but also what sounded like additional forces. "You have 1 hour to consider our offer," the voice said finally. "After that, the federal raids commence, and your options become significantly limited." The attackers began withdrawing as smoothly as they'd arrived, leaving only the speaker behind. Angela emerged from the shadows, checking her weapons with professional efficiency. "Well, that was enlightening. Anyone else feel like we just got press-ganged into service? The question is whether we fight it or use it to our advantage," Samantha said pragmatically. Octavio holstered his gun, his mind already working through possibilities and consequences. "Depends on exactly what they're offering and what they want in return." "Only one way to find out," Angela said with a predatory smile. "But if we're doing this, we do it together. I don't trust them, but I trust you two to watch my back." "Partners in crime?" Samantha asked with dark humor. "Partners in survival," Octavio corrected. But as they prepared to leave the warehouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than any of them realized. The safe house in the Hamptons belonged to one of Samantha's shell companies, a sprawling modernist estate that looked like it had been designed by someone who collected art and secrets in equal measure. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the Atlantic, while hidden security measures would have impressed paranoid dictators. Octavio stood on the deck with a cup of espresso, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. 6 hours had passed since the warehouse confrontation, and his mind was still processing the implications. "Beautiful view," Angela said, joining him at the railing. She'd traded her black coat for jeans and a sweater that made her look deceptively normal, if you could ignore the shoulder holster and the predatory way her eyes constantly scanned for threats. "Peaceful," Octavio agreed. Hard to believe we're discussing whether to become assets of some shadow government agency. Shadow government, private military contractor, or elaborate con game, Angela mused. The question is, whether it matters. They've got us backed into a corner either way. Samantha emerged from the house carrying a laptop and wearing an expression that promised either salvation or apocalypse. I've been researching our mysterious job interviewers. The electronic voice distortion was professional grade, but there were background audio signatures that my tech people traced. She set the laptop on the deck table, showing them a complex analysis of frequency patterns and digital fingerprints. The transmission originated from a facility in Virginia that doesn't officially exist. No government records, no corporate registrations, but satellite imagery shows significant infrastructure and security. CIA? Octavio asked. Something newer and less accountable. Samantha's fingers danced across the keyboard, bringing up financial records and personnel files. Cross-referencing funding sources and known personnel, I think we're looking at a private intelligence operation with government contracts, officially deniable, actually essential. Angela studied the screen with the focused attention of a professional killer. Which means they can make promises the official government couldn't keep, but also that they can eliminate problems the official government couldn't touch. Exactly. We're not just being recruited, we're being absorbed into something that operates completely outside normal legal and ethical constraints. Samantha's expression was grim. The question is whether we can maintain any independence within that structure. Octavio's phone rang, displaying the same unknown number from the warehouse. He answered on speaker. Mr. Moretti, I trust you've had time to consider our proposal. We have questions, Octavio said without preamble. Of course you do. Ms. Richards, I assume you've been conducting research. Your curiosity was one of the traits that brought you to our attention. What exactly are you asking us to do? Samantha demanded. Provide services that traditional government agencies cannot officially provide. International enforcement, asset recovery, intelligence gathering in areas where legal authority doesn't exist or apply. Assassination and theft, in other words, Angela said bluntly, when necessary, among other services, but with resources and protection that would make your current operations seem primitive. The voice carried a note of amusement. Ms. Torino, your current enforcement methods are effective but limited in scope. We could offer you targets that actually matter, such as international human traffickers who hide behind diplomatic immunity, cartel leaders who corrupt entire governments, terrorist financiers who operate through legitimate banking systems. A pause. People who deserve what you do to them. Angela's eyes gleamed with interest despite herself. And the legal protection? Absolute. Your activities would fall under national security classifications that supersede all other legal considerations. You would be, in effect, untouchable. Samantha leaned forward. What about our existing organizations? Enhanced, not eliminated. Your businesses become covers for international operations. Your territories become bases of operation. Your personnel become assets in a much larger network. And if we want out? Octavio asked. The silence stretched long enough to be ominous. That question suggests you haven't fully grasped the scope of what we're offering, Mr. Moretti. This isn't employment. It's evolution. You would become part of something that shapes global events, rather than merely reacting to them. That's not an answer, Angela observed. The honest answer is that people with your knowledge and capabilities don't retire. Ms. Torino. They either continue to be useful, or they become problems that require solving. Another uncomfortable silence. Finally, Samantha spoke. We want to meet in person. All cards on the table, real names, actual terms of engagement. That's unusual. Most recruits prefer the comfort of anonymity during initial negotiations. We're not most recruits, Octavio said. If you want our cooperation, you deal with us as equals. Very well, tonight 8 p.m. coordinates will be sent to your phones. Come alone armed if you prefer, but understand that betrayal would be inadvisable. The line went dead, leaving the three of them staring at each other across the deck table. Well, Angela said finally, this should be interesting. Anyone else feel like we're about to find out whether we're predators or prey in this food chain? Only one way to find out, Samantha replied, but her hand unconsciously moved to check her weapon. Octavio watched the sun climb higher above the ocean, thinking about Maria, about the promises he'd made to build something lasting, something meaningful. This wasn't what she'd had in mind, But maybe it was the only path forward that didn't end with them all in graves or prison cells. "Together?" he asked. "Together," they agreed, though none of them were entirely sure what they were agreeing to. Dhaka. The coordinates led them to a private airfield in New Jersey, where a sleek corporate jet waited with engines already running. No identification markings, no flight plan visible, no crew except for a pilot who nodded without speaking when they approached. Octavio, Samantha, and Angela sat in leather seats that probably cost more than most cars, watching the eastern seaboard disappear beneath them as the plane climbed into the evening sky. None of them spoke during the 2-hour flight, each lost in calculations of risk and opportunity. They landed at another anonymous airfield, this one surrounded by Virginia pine forests, and the kind of security that made Octavio's instincts scream warnings. Men with military bearing and serious weapons checked their credentials with professional efficiency before escorting them to a black SUV. The facility they eventually reached looked like a cross between a corporate campus and a military installation. Modern glass buildings nestled among trees with discreet security measures and the subtle hum of serious money and serious purpose. "Welcome to nowhere," their escort said as they approached the main building. "Officially, this place doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's where we handle problems the regular government can't touch." Inside, the architecture was all clean lines and expensive minimalism. They were led to a conference room with a view of manicured gardens and what looked like a helicopter landing pad. 3 people waited for them around a polished table. The man at the head of the table looked like Central Casting's idea of a spy master. Silver hair, expensive suit, eyes that had seen too much and judged accordingly. "Director Harrison," he introduced himself without offering a handshake. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." To his right sat a woman in her 40s, with auburn hair and the kind of perfectly controlled appearance that suggested either corporate executive or professional assassin. "Deputy Director Chen, Operations Oversight." The third person was younger, maybe early 30s, with the lean build and alert eyes of someone who'd spent time in combat zones. "Agent Martinez, Field Coordination." "Impressive setup," Samantha said, settling into her chair with the confidence of someone who'd negotiated with heads of state. "Now let's discuss exactly what you want from us." Director Harrison opened a tablet and slid it across the table. "Your first assignment, 3 targets, all currently beyond the reach of traditional law enforcement." The screen showed photographs and dossiers of men who looked successful, respectable, and completely ordinary, which Octavio knew from experience often meant they were the most dangerous kind of criminals. "Viktor Kozlov," Harrison began, "Russian oligarch who finances terrorism through humanitarian charities. Traditional prosecution is impossible due to diplomatic immunity and shell corporation layers." "Ahmed al-Rashid, Syrian arms dealer who supplies weapons to groups that target American interests. He operates through businesses in countries that don't extradite." "David Thornton, American businessman who runs trafficking networks through legitimate shipping companies. Political connections make him untouchable through normal channels." Angela studied the photos with professional interest. "What exactly are you asking us to do? Kidnapping, assassination, or just economic pressure?" "Whatever is most effective," Deputy Director Chen replied. "Kozlov needs to be permanently removed from operations. Al-Rashid requires elimination along with his distribution networks. Thornton should be neutralized, but his business infrastructure preserved for intelligence purposes." "In other words," Octavio said, "you want us to murder 2 of them and destroy the 3rd. "We want you to solve problems that threaten American interests and global stability," Martinez corrected. "The methods are up to your professional judgment." Samantha leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Resources, support, legal protection if something goes wrong, unlimited funding for operational needs, technical support including intelligence, surveillance, and communications, legal immunity for any actions taken under our authorization." Harrison's voice was matter-of-fact. "You would operate with the full backing of elements within the U.S. government while maintaining absolute deniability." "And compensation?" Angela asked bluntly. $10 million per successful mission, plus operational bonuses and territorial considerations for your existing organizations." The number hung in the air like a challenge. Octavio had stolen, extorted, and murdered for decades, but never for that kind of money per job. "What's the timeline?" Samantha asked. 6 months for all 3 targets. Success brings you into the permanent program with increasingly significant assignments. And failure? Chen's smile was as warm as winter in Siberia. Let's focus on success, shall we? Octavio studied the three government representatives, reading body language and micro-expressions the way other people read books. They were offering legitimate power, the kind that shaped international events and toppled governments. But they were also offering a leash disguised as an opportunity. We need operational independence, he said finally. You provide objectives and support, but we choose methods and timing. Agreed, within reasonable parameters. We maintain our existing organizations and territories without interference, as long as they don't conflict with operational requirements. And we can terminate this arrangement if we choose. The pause was just long enough to be meaningful. After successful completion of initial assignments, reassessment becomes possible. Angela laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Translation: you own us once we start. Ms. Torino, you're already owned by circumstances. We're offering you the chance to be owned by something that provides actual power, instead of just survival. The brutal honesty was almost refreshing. Octavio looked at Samantha and Angela, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They could refuse, try to go back to their old lives, and probably end up dead or in federal prison within weeks. Or they could accept this deal with the devil and become part of something larger and more dangerous than anything they'd imagined. 48 hours to consider, Samantha asked. 24, Harrison corrected. Global events don't wait for comfortable decision-making timelines. As they prepared to leave, Martinez handed each of them an encrypted phone. Secure communication device. Answer when it rings. Walking back to their transportation, Angela shook her head with dark humor. Well, that escalated quickly. Anyone else feel like we just got recruited by the devil himself? The question, Samantha said quietly, is whether working for the devil is better than fighting him. Octavio thought about Maria again, about promises and legacies and the price of survival in a world that offered no guarantees. Maybe this was evolution, not betrayal. Maybe this was how they honored the past while ensuring there was a future. 24 hours to decide whether we become international assassins, he mused. Or international assets, Samantha corrected. The terminology matters. Does it? Angela asked. Either way, we're about to cross a line we can't uncross. They rode back to the airfield in silence, each contemplating a future that was either incredibly promising or utterly terrifying. Possibly both. The penthouse felt different when Octavio returned. Smaller somehow, as if the conversation in Virginia had expanded his perspective beyond the comfortable boundaries of his old life. He poured bourbon with hands that were steady despite everything and settled into his leather chair to call the two women who now held his future in their hands. So, Angela's voice crackled through the secure phone, anyone else spent the last 6 hours researching whether it's possible to disappear completely if this goes wrong? Already did that research 6 months ago, Samantha replied, joining the three-way call. The answer is no, by the way. These people have resources that make witness protection look like hiding behind a tree. Octavio sipped his bourbon, noting that for the first time in years he wasn't drinking to forget, but to think more clearly. I've been considering the alternative scenarios. If we refuse, we're probably dead within weeks. Federal raids, mysterious accidents, or just plain old-fashioned assassination. Cheerful, Angela said dryly, but accurate. I ran the numbers on going to war with these people. Estimated survival time, -0 days. So we're not really choosing whether to take the job, Samantha concluded. We're choosing how to take it, reluctantly or enthusiastically. There's a third option, Octavio said quietly. We take the job and use it to position ourselves for eventual independence. These people need us, or they wouldn't be going to such elaborate lengths to recruit us. That gives us leverage if we're smart about using it. Silence stretched across the connection as they each processed the implications. Finally, Angela laughed. Not her usual bitter amusement, but something approaching genuine mirth. You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I was planning to kill both of you to expand my territory. Now I'm considering whether to trust you with my life in an international assassination scheme. Character growth, Samantha suggested with dark humor. Or collective insanity, Angela replied. But if we're doing this, we need rules, clear boundaries about loyalty, decision-making, and what happens if one of us wants out. Agreed, Octavio said. And we need to understand exactly what we're walking into. These people aren't offering us a job. They're offering us a new identity. We become their weapons, but weapons they can't afford to lose. Which means they'll protect us as long as we're useful, Samantha added. The trick is making sure we stay useful while building our own insurance policies. Insurance policies? Angela asked. Information, resources, connections that exist outside their control. Things that make us too valuable to eliminate and too dangerous to betray. Octavio nodded, though neither woman could see him. A partnership within a partnership. We serve their interests, but we protect each other's. Blood oath, or just mutual self-interest? Angela asked with genuine curiosity. Both, Samantha said immediately. Self-interest makes it practical, but blood makes it personal. These people understand fear and greed, but they'll underestimate loyalty if we're careful about how we present it. The encrypted phones buzzed simultaneously with an incoming message. 3 words. Decision required now. Well, Angela said, apparently our 24 hours just became 24 seconds. Octavio stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city where his grandfather had built an empire with nothing but determination and violence. 3 generations of Morettis had carved their names into New York's underworld through careful calculation and ruthless execution. Maybe this was just the next evolution. Are we partners? He asked. Partners, Samantha confirmed without hesitation. Partners, Angela agreed. Until death or retirement, whichever comes first. Then let's call them back, Octavio said, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over him. But not as desperate fugitives accepting their terms, as professionals negotiating a contract. Samantha's laugh carried genuine admiration. You want to counteroffer the shadow government spy masters who just recruited us at gunpoint? I want to establish that we're assets, not employees, Octavio corrected. There's a difference, and that difference might keep us alive. 20 minutes later, they sat in Angela's car outside a secure warehouse in Queens, the encrypted phone on speaker, as Director Harrison's voice filled the space. You've reached a decision? We accept the assignment, Octavio said, with modifications to the operational structure. I wasn't aware we were still negotiating. Mr. Moretti. Every successful partnership requires ongoing negotiation, Samantha interjected smoothly. We're prepared to deliver results that exceed your expectations, but we need operational parameters that account for our unique capabilities. Which are, combined, we control territory, resources and intelligence networks across 3 major criminal organizations, Angela said. That gives us access and cover that your regular assets can't match, but it also means we need protection for our existing operations during mission periods. Reasonable terms? Operational bonuses tied to speed and efficiency of completion, enhanced legal protection for our lieutenants and key personnel, and guaranteed territorial integrity during and after mission completion. Silence stretched for 30 seconds. When Harrison spoke again, his voice carried a note of respect that hadn't been there before. Acceptable, but understand, success brings higher stakes and more complex assignments. This is not a short-term arrangement. We understand, Octavio replied. When do we start? Target packages will be delivered tomorrow. Good luck. The line went dead, leaving them sitting in the darkness of Angela's car, contemplating what they'd just agreed to. So, Angela said finally, anyone else feel like we just sold our souls to buy our lives? Maybe, Samantha replied, but at least we negotiated a good price. Octavio thought about Maria again, about promises and legacies and the complex mathematics of survival. She would have understood, he said quietly. Your wife? Angela asked. Yes, she always said the most important thing wasn't what you did, but who you became while doing it. And who are we becoming? Samantha asked. Octavio looked at these 2 remarkable women who'd somehow become his partners in an enterprise that would either elevate them to unprecedented power or destroy them completely. Something new, he said finally. Something dangerous. Something that might actually matter. Outside, the city hummed with its usual blend of ambition and desperation, unaware that 3 of its most notorious criminals had just agreed to become something else entirely. 6 weeks later, Octavio stood on the observation deck of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a circuit board made of gold and ambition. The first target, Viktor Kozlov, was attending a charity gala 30 floors below, a fundraiser for Syrian refugees that would actually finance the next year's worth of terrorist operations in Eastern Europe. His earpiece crackled with Samantha's voice from the control room she'd established in a corporate suite across the city. Security sweep confirms 12 bodyguards, rotating positions every 20 minutes. Local police have been paid to ignore any unusual activity tonight. And our exit strategy? Angela's voice joined the conversation from her position in the hotel's service corridors. 3 primary routes, 2 backup plans, and a helicopter on standby, Octavio replied, adjusting his formal tuxedo one final time. If everything goes wrong, we have diplomatic cover through Samantha's business connections. Let's not test the diplomatic cover, Angela said dryly. I prefer my international incidents to be small and deniable. Octavio smiled despite the tension. Over the past 6 weeks, they developed a partnership that was part military unit, part crime family, and part corporate board. Each mission had brought them closer together, building trust through shared danger and mutual competence. Target is moving toward the private dining room, Samantha reported. Kozlov likes to conduct his real business away from the main event. You'll have approximately 15 minutes before his security starts looking for him. Octavio moved through the gala with the practiced ease of a man who'd attended hundreds of similar events during his marriage to Maria. Wealthy people were the same everywhere. They clustered around power, gossiped about money, and rarely noticed the staff who served them. The private dining room was elegant, intimate, and perfectly positioned for the kind of conversation that ended with either business deals or body bags. Kozlov sat at the head of a table with 6 men who looked like international money and violence had bred together to produce the ultimate predators. Gentlemen, Octavio said as he entered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who belonged in rooms like this. Mr. Kozlov, I believe we have mutual acquaintances who suggested we should meet. Kozlov was a small man with intelligent eyes and the kind of understated elegance that came from having people killed with telephone calls rather than personal violence. I don't believe we've been introduced, Mr. Moretti, and you're right, we haven't been introduced. I'm here to discuss your retirement. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Hands moved toward weapons that were definitely not part of formal dinnerware. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Kozlov said carefully. No misunderstanding. Your humanitarian charities have been funding operations that killed 17 American intelligence assets in the past 2 years. My associates and I have been contracted to ensure that stops happening. Your associates? As if summoned, Angela appeared behind 2 of Kozlov's bodyguards, moving with the silent lethality of a professional killer. The men dropped before they realized she was there. Miss Torino has an impressive skill set, Octavio noted conversationally. Corporate restructuring through direct intervention. Samantha's voice whispered in his earpiece. Local security is responding to the dining room. You have 3 minutes. Mr. Kozlov, you have 2 choices, Octavio continued, pulling a silenced pistol from his jacket with casual precision. Option 1, you retire immediately, liquidate all terrorist-related assets, and disappear to somewhere that doesn't have extradition treaties. Option 2, you don't. And if I choose option 1, you get to discover whether retirement in the Seychelles is as pleasant as it looks in travel brochures. And option 2, Angela's smile was visible from across the room, beautiful and absolutely terrifying. You don't get to discover anything else ever. Kozlov looked around the room at his remaining security personnel, calculating odds and options with the cold precision of a man who'd survived decades in the international crime business. The charity accounts will be liquidated by tomorrow morning, he said finally. All operations will cease within 72 hours. Excellent choice, Octavio said, lowering his weapon. There's a car waiting outside the service entrance. I suggest you use it. And if I change my mind about retirement... Mr. Kozlov, Samantha's voice crackled through speakers hidden in the room. She'd hacked the dining room's communication system. I've spent the last 6 weeks mapping every asset. Account and business relationship you control. Changing your mind would be complicated. Plus, Angela added cheerfully, I know where you live. All 17 properties, including the ones you think are secret. Kozlov nodded slowly, understanding that this wasn't a negotiation. It was a professionally executed termination of his criminal career. It's been educational, gentlemen and lady. After Kozlov and his remaining security left, the 3 partners regrouped in Samantha's control room. The suite overlooked Dubai Marina, and the lights of the city sparkled like a jewelry display designed by someone with unlimited resources and questionable taste. Target 1 neutralized without casualties, Octavio reported into the secure satellite phone. Retirement package successfully delivered. Director Harrison's voice carried satisfaction, mixed with surprise. Efficient work. Most contractors would have simply eliminated him. Dead terrorists can't provide intelligence about their networks, Samantha pointed out. Mr. Kozlov's retirement will include extensive debriefings about his former associates. Smart thinking. Proceed to target 2. After ending the call, Angela poured 3 glasses of champagne from the suite's well-stocked bar. 1 down, 2 to go. Anyone else feel like we're getting disturbingly good at this? Professional development, Octavio said, accepting his glass. Though I admit it's refreshing to work with competent partners. Competent and attractive, Samantha added, with a smile that made Octavio's pulse quicken despite everything. Not a combination you find in every criminal enterprise. They stood together at the window, looking out at a city built on ambition and oil money, each lost in their own thoughts about what they were becoming and where this path might lead. To partnership, Angela said, raising her glass. To evolution, Samantha added. To Maria, Octavio said quietly, and to whatever we're building in her memory. They drank, sealed their commitment with crystal and expensive wine, and began planning the downfall of an arms dealer who had no idea that his world was about to change forever. 3 months later, Octavio walked through the snow-covered cemetery in Westchester, carrying white roses to Maria's grave. The headstone was elegant black marble with her name, dates and the simple inscription, "Beloved wife, eternal inspiration." "I know this isn't what you had in mind," he said quietly, placing the flowers against the cold stone. "When you told me to build something lasting, something that mattered, you were thinking legitimate businesses and charitable foundations." The wind rustled through bare trees, carrying the scent of winter and the promise of spring still months away. "But I think you'd understand what we've become. We're not just surviving anymore. We're making a difference." Kozlov's retirement led to the discovery of 3 terrorist networks. Al-Rashid's elimination disrupted arms supplies to groups that were planning attacks on American soil. And Thornton, Octavio smiled slightly, his human trafficking empire is now being run by federal agents who are using it to identify and rescue victims worldwide. Footsteps crunched on the frozen ground behind him. He turned to see Samantha and Angela approaching, both dressed in elegant black coats that managed to be both mourning-appropriate and subtly armed. "We didn't mean to interrupt," Samantha said softly. "You're not interrupting. Maria always believed in building family, not just business." Octavio gestured to the headstone. "I'd like you both to meet my wife." Angela stepped forward, her usual sharp edge softened by genuine respect. "Mrs. Moretti, your husband talks about you constantly, always about your wisdom, your strength, your vision for building something better." "She's right," Samantha added. "Everything he's accomplished, everything we're building together, he credits to lessons you taught him. I hope what we're doing would make you proud." Octavio felt his chest tighten with emotions he'd buried for years. She would have liked you both. Maria always said the most important partnerships were built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, 3 dangerous people paying homage to the memory of a woman who'd believed in redemption through love and determination. Finally, Angela broke the silence. "Director Harrison called this morning. New assignment." "Larger scale?" Octavio asked. "International syndicate moving drugs and weapons through humanitarian aid shipments. Operations in 6 countries, protected by diplomatic immunity and political corruption." Samantha's voice carried grim satisfaction. "The kind of problem that traditional law enforcement can't touch." "Timeline?" 6 months. Full operational independence, unlimited resources, and—" Angela's smile was sharp as winter air. $40 million, plus territorial expansion rights for all our organizations." Octavio looked back at Maria's grave, thinking about promises and legacies and the strange mathematics of honor in a dishonorable world. She used to say that true power wasn't about controlling people, it was about protecting them, he said quietly. "I think we've found a way to do both." "The partnership is working," Samantha agreed. "Better than any of us expected." "We've become something new," Angela added. "Not just criminals, not just government assets, but something in between, something that can operate where others can't." "Something that matters," Octavio concluded. He touched Maria's headstone one last time, feeling peace settle in his chest like dawn after a long, dark night. "All right, let's go save the world again." As they walked back toward their cars, Samantha fell into step beside him. "Octavio? That night when I showed up in your penthouse wearing your shirt? What about it? I told you that you needed to change everything about your life. Her smile was warm, genuine and just dangerous enough to make his pulse race. I was wrong. Oh? You didn't need to change everything. You just needed to remember who you really were underneath all that grief and whiskey. Angela looked back over her shoulder with amusement. Are you two going to keep pretending this is just a business partnership, or are you going to admit you're falling in love? Octavio and Samantha exchanged glances, and for the first time since Maria's death, he felt his heart open to possibilities beyond mere survival. Love is complicated in our line of work, he said carefully. Everything worthwhile is complicated, Samantha replied. The question is whether it's worth the risk. Maria used to say that the only real failure was not trying, Octavio said, surprising himself with the admission. Smart woman, Angela observed. No wonder you've spent 3 years being miserable without her guidance. They reached their cars as snow began falling more heavily, dusting their shoulders and the cemetery grounds with pristine white. Octavio looked back once more at Maria's grave, then at the 2 remarkable women who'd somehow become his partners in reshaping the world through carefully applied violence and strategic disruption. So, Samantha said, international criminal syndicate, 6 countries, $40 million, and the future of our partnership, both professional and personal, hanging in the balance. Just another Tuesday, Angela said with dark humor. Just another chance to build something lasting, Octavio corrected, thinking of Maria's dreams and his own newfound sense of purpose. As they drove away from the cemetery, snow continued to fall, covering the past with promises of renewal, while 3 unlikely partners headed toward a future that was either spectacularly promising or catastrophically dangerous, possibly both. In the distance, Manhattan's skyline gleamed through the winter storm, a city of 8 million people who had no idea that their safety increasingly depended on the careful calculations and controlled violence of a widowed mafia boss, a brilliant CEO, and a professional killer who'd learned to trust each other with their lives. It wasn't the legacy Maria had envisioned, but it was the one Octavio was building. One mission, one partnership, one carefully executed operation at a time. And for the first time in years, he was genuinely looking forward to tomorrow.